The vampire lord's hands were burning, flesh sizzling as molten gold dripped between his fingers. And Lord Cassian Greythorn stood frozen in the doorway of the treasury, watching the immortal creature destroy a fortune that could have saved his entire province 3 times over, while outside, beyond the castle walls, his people were dying in the streets. Wait, before the next revelation happens, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. Stop! Cassian's voice cracked as he stumbled forward, but the vampire didn't even glance his way. The creature, Lord Valerian Nightshade, as he'd introduced himself 3 nights ago when he'd arrived at Greythorn Manor uninvited, continued melting the gold coins in his bare hands, his pale skin blackening and peeling away, only to regenerate moments later in an endless cycle of destruction and healing. The treasury was Cassian's last hope. 2 failed harvests, a plague that had decimated the livestock, and the crown's merciless tax collectors had left the Greythorn province on the brink of collapse. Cassian had spent weeks begging for aid from neighboring lords, from the church, from anyone who would listen. They'd all turned him away. The gold in this room, inherited from 5 generations of Greythorns, was all that stood between his people and mass starvation. And this monster was burning it. I said stop! Cassian lunged forward, grabbing Valerian's arm. The heat was unbearable, searing through his gloves instantly, but he held on. That gold is the only thing that can save them. Valerian finally turned, and Cassian found himself staring into eyes that held centuries of accumulated sorrow. The vampire's face was beautiful in the way ancient marble statues were beautiful, perfect, cold, and utterly inhuman. But those eyes... "Gold cannot be eaten, Lord Greythorn," Valerian said softly, his voice like silk over steel. "And you have no time to travel to the markets that would accept it. The nearest city with grain surplus is 3 weeks away by cart. Your people will be dead in 1. "Then what?" Cassian choked on smoke and despair. "Why are you doing this?" "Because your people are dying, and you are too honorable to do what must be done." Valerian dropped the molten gold, which splattered across the stone floor like liquid sunlight. His hands were already healing, new skin crawling across charred bone. "Tell me, Lord Greythorn, how many of your people would you sacrifice to preserve your morality?" Cassian released him, stepping back. "What are you talking about?" "There is a way to save them. There has always been a way." Valerian moved toward the treasury window, where the dying sunset painted the sky the color of old blood. Beyond the castle walls, Greythorn Village was visible, a collection of thatched roofs and mud streets where hundreds of families huddled in their homes, too weak from hunger to do more than wait for death. But it requires you to accept help from a creature you've been taught to fear and despise. "I don't understand." Valerian turned, and something flickered across his ancient face, something that might have been respect, or might have been pity. "I am 537 years old, Cassian Greythorn. In that time, I have amassed wealth beyond your comprehension. I have estates in 12 kingdoms, businesses in 30 cities, and enough gold to buy your entire province 10 times over." He gestured to the melted coins on the floor. This is nothing to me. Less than nothing." Then why? Because I wanted you to understand that gold is not the answer. Not this time. Valerian crossed the room with inhuman speed, stopping mere inches from Cassian. I can save your people. I can have grain delivered here within 3 days. I can provide medicine, livestock, seeds for the next planting season. I can make your province prosperous again. Cassian's heart hammered against his ribs. In exchange for what? My soul? My service? The blood of my people? In exchange, Valerian said slowly, for your trust. The word hung between them like a curse. That's all? Cassian heard the skepticism in his own voice. You want me to trust you, and you'll save thousands of lives? Forgive me if I find that difficult to believe. Not just trust. Valerian turned away, moving back to the window. I want you to let me stay here, in your castle, in your province. I want you to tell your people that I am here under your protection, that I am to be treated as an honored guest. I want you to defend me when the church comes, and they will come, Lord Greythorn. The moment word spreads that a vampire is living openly among humans, they will come with their holy water and their silver and their righteous fury. You want me to protect you from the church? Cassian laughed, but it was a bitter sound. I'm a minor lord with no army and no political power. I couldn't protect you from a determined mob, let alone the church's inquisitors. You underestimate yourself. Valerian's reflection in the window glass was strange, present but somehow less substantial than it should be, as if he existed slightly out of phase with reality. And you underestimate what it means when a good man chooses to stand with a monster. That kind of moral courage changes things, Cassian. It shifts the balance of the world in ways you cannot yet comprehend. I'm not a good man, Cassian said quietly. A good man wouldn't have let things get this bad. A good man would have found a way to help his people before they started dying in the streets. A good man is not one who never fails, Valerian replied. A good man is one who continues trying even after he has failed. You have spent weeks begging for help from people who could provide it and chose not to. You have sold everything you own of value. I noticed the bare walls where your family portraits once hung, the empty spaces where your mother's jewelry should be displayed. You have given everything, including your pride, and it still wasn't enough. He turned from the window. That is why I chose you. Chose me for what? For an experiment. Valerian's smile was sad. I have lived a long time, Lord Greythorn, and I have seen the worst of humanity. I have seen what you call civilization built on the backs of slaves and the bones of the conquered. I have watched as good people stood by while evil flourished, too afraid or too comfortable to act. I have participated in that evil myself more times than I care to remember. He moved closer. But I have also seen glimpses of something better. Moments when a human chose compassion over comfort, justice over safety. Those moments are rare, but they are remarkable. So this is about your conscience? Cassian felt anger flaring in his chest. You want to ease 500 years of guilt by playing the savior to some desperate peasants? Yes, Valerian said simply. Is that so wrong? Does the reason matter if your people are fed? Cassian wanted to say yes, that it mattered terribly, that accepting charity from a vampire was a betrayal of everything he'd been taught. But in his mind's eye, he saw the faces of his people, the hollow-cheeked children too weak to cry, the mothers who'd stopped producing milk, the old men and women who'd started giving their food portions to the younger generation, choosing death so that others might live a few days longer. How do I know you'll keep your word? He asked. You don't. Valerian's honesty was brutal. I could be lying. This could all be some elaborate scheme to— What? Enslave your people? I'm immortal, Lord Greythorn. I don't need slaves. Seduce you? I'm 5 centuries past finding physical pleasure in such simple ways. Steal your soul? I don't believe in souls, or if they exist, I lost mine long ago. Then what do you gain? A chance, Valerian said softly, to be something other than a monster, even if only for a little while. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling of the still cooling gold on the floor. Outside, church bells began to toll, the evening death count. Cassian closed his eyes and counted. 7 bells. 7 more dead today. Yesterday it had been 9. The day before, 11. If I agree, he said slowly, opening his eyes, I need more than your word. I need proof that you can do what you claim, and I need assurances that you won't harm my people. Fair enough. Valerian extended his hand. Shake on it, and I will demonstrate my sincerity. But know this, Cassian Greythorn. Once you take my hand, once you accept my help, there is no going back. Your reputation will be tied to mine. You will be known as the Lord who sheltered a vampire. The church will condemn you. Your fellow nobles will shun you. You may lose everything. I've already lost everything, Cassian said. He looked at the vampire's pale hand, remembering the way it had burned as it melted gold. This creature had endured unimaginable pain without flinching, destroying his own wealth to make a point. Everything except my people, and they're dying. He gripped Valerian's hand. The vampire's skin was cool but not cold, smooth but not dead. It felt surprisingly human. Valerian's fingers tightened around his, and for a moment something passed between them. A recognition, perhaps, or an understanding that they were both gambling with fate itself. Then let us begin, Valerian said. Come with me. They left the treasury, moving through the castle's empty halls. Cassian had dismissed most of his servants months ago when he could no longer afford to pay them. The few who remained had stayed out of loyalty rather than wages. His elderly steward, Marcus, and his wife Hannah, who served as both cook and housekeeper, and their daughter Eliza, who'd grown up playing in these halls with Cassian. Valerian led him to the main courtyard, where night had fully fallen. The vampire stood in the center of the open space and tilted his head back, closing his eyes. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Valerian began to speak, not in any language Cassian recognized, but in something older, something that seemed to resonate in his bones. The air grew heavy. Pressure built in Cassian's ears as if he were descending into deep water. The stars above began to brighten, growing more vivid until they blazed like tiny suns. And then, impossibly, they began to move. Threads of starlight descended from the heavens, weaving themselves into intricate patterns around Valerian. The vampire's eyes snapped open, now glowing with the same ethereal radiance. He raised his arms, and the starlight responded, coalescing into solid forms, shapes that Cassian's mind struggled to comprehend at first, then suddenly recognized. Grain sacks, hundreds of them, materializing out of pure light and settling gently onto the courtyard stones. As each one touched the ground, it solidified, transforming from luminous energy into physical reality. The smell of wheat and barley filled the air, rich and wholesome. But Valerian wasn't finished. More starlight fell, creating crates of dried fruit, wheels of cheese sealed in wax, barrels of salted meat, jars of honey, sacks of beans and lentils. The courtyard was filling with enough food to feed the entire province for months. Cassian sank to his knees, overwhelmed. How? Magic older than your church, Valerian said, his voice strained. Older than most kingdoms. The vampires were not always monsters, Lord Greythorn. Once, very long ago, we were something else. Something that stood between humanity and the darker things that crawl in the spaces between stars. He lowered his arms, and the starlight faded. Most of my kind have forgotten those days. They've become exactly what the stories say they are, predators, nothing more. But some of us remember. Some of us still can touch the old powers, though it costs us dearly. Indeed, Valerian was swaying on his feet, his face even paler than before. Cassian rushed forward, catching the vampire before he fell. Valerian's weight was startling, far heavier than his slender frame suggested, as if his bones were made of stone. "You're hurt," Cassian said. "Merely exhausted. Bending the fabric of reality is taxing." Valerian's eyes focused on him with difficulty. "The food will last your people through winter and into spring. Tomorrow I will arrange for livestock to be delivered, the conventional way, with merchants and coin. And we will begin planning for the future. But tonight," he struggled to stand upright, "tonight I must rest." "Hannah!" Cassian called. The housekeeper appeared from the shadows of the doorway, her eyes wide as she took in the impossible bounty filling the courtyard. "Prepare the blue guest chamber. Lord Valerian needs—" "A dark room," Valerian interrupted. "No windows, no candles. I need complete darkness and silence." Hannah nodded and hurried away. Cassian helped Valerian into the castle, supporting the vampire's weight as they climbed the stairs to the third floor, where the windowless storage rooms had been converted into occasional guest quarters. Hannah had already prepared the room, removing anything that might produce light. "Will you be all right?" Cassian asked as he helped Valerian to the bed. "Ask me that question again in a few days," Valerian murmured. "Ask me after you've had time to truly consider what you've agreed to. Ask me when the church's inquisitors arrive with their accusations and their fires." His eyes drifted closed. "Ask me when you realize that saving your people may have damned your soul." "I don't believe in damnation," Cassian said quietly. "Not anymore. If there's a God who would condemn me for accepting help to feed the starving, then that's not a God worth worshipping." Valerian's lips curved into a smile. "You say that now. We'll see if you still believe it when tested." His breathing slowed, becoming almost imperceptible. "Thank you, Cassian Greythorn, for taking my hand, for choosing trust over fear." "Thank you," Cassian replied, "for caring whether my people lived or died." But Valerian was already asleep, or whatever state vampires entered when they surrendered consciousness. Cassian returned to the courtyard, where Marcus and Hannah were staring at the mountains of food in shock. Eliza had joined them, tears streaming down her young face. "My lord," Marcus breathed, "how did you—" "I made a deal," Cassian said simply. "Tomorrow we begin distributing this food to every family in the province. No one will go hungry, not anymore." "But where did it come from?" Eliza asked. "Does it matter?" Hannah put her arm around her daughter. "It's here. It's real. Our people will live." "It came from him," Cassian said, deciding that honesty was better than lies. "From Lord Valerian Nightshade, the man sleeping in our guest room. And before you ask, yes, the rumors you've heard are true. He is a vampire. He is also the reason no one else in this province will starve to death." The silence was heavy with implications. "You're asking us to keep a vampire under our roof," Marcus said slowly. "To protect him if anyone comes asking." "I'm not asking," Cassian said. I'm telling you the truth and letting you decide for yourselves. If you want to leave, I'll understand. I'll give you whatever coin I have left and letters of recommendation. But if you stay, you need to know what you're staying for. You need to be prepared for what may come. Marcus exchanged a long look with his wife. Hannah's face was drawn with worry, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. 20 years ago, when the fever swept through this province, my Marcus was dying. Your father could have let him die. He was just a servant, easily replaced. Instead, Lord Greythorn spent a fortune bringing a healer from the capital. He saved Marcus' life. She straightened her shoulders. We stayed when you couldn't pay us. We stayed when every other servant fled. We'll stay now, whatever comes. Whatever comes, Marcus echoed. Eliza nodded, wiping her tears. The children in the village are my friends. If the vampire saved them, then he can't be all bad, can he? I don't know, Cassian said honestly, but we're about to find out. The next morning, Cassian woke to the sound of shouting in the village. He dressed quickly and rushed outside to find dozens of people gathered at the castle gates, their faces lit with desperate hope. "Is it true, my lord?" Old Thomas, the village elder, called out. His voice was weak with hunger, but his eyes blazed with intensity. "They say you have food. They say there are wagons coming down from the castle." Indeed, Marcus and 3 hired men were carefully loading grain sacks onto carts. Cassian had spent half the night working out the mathematics, how much each family would need, how to ensure fair distribution, how to prevent hoarding or theft. "It's true," Cassian said. "There is enough for everyone, more than enough. You will all be fed." The crowd erupted in cheers and weeping. People fell to their knees, offering prayers of thanksgiving. Some tried to kiss Cassian's hands, his feet, calling him their savior. "I'm not your savior," he said, gently pulling away from their desperate gratitude. I had help, unexpected help." "From the crown?" someone asked. "From the church?" another voice called. "From a friend," Cassian said carefully. "Someone who heard of your suffering and chose to act. That's all you need to know for now. Today, we focus on distribution. Tomorrow, we begin planning for the future. But first, we eat." The distribution took all day. By sunset, every family in Greythorn Village had received their share of grain, dried fruit, cheese, and meat. The transformation was immediate and profound. Children who'd been too weak to play were running through the streets. Mothers were cooking meals for the first time in weeks. The smell of baking bread, absent from the village for so long, once again filled the evening air. Cassian stood on the castle ramparts, watching smoke rise from hundreds of cooking fires. For the first time in months, he felt something that might have been peace. "They're happy," Valerian said from behind him. Cassian turned. The vampire looked fully recovered, his pale skin glowing in the twilight. "You saved them." "We saved them," Valerian corrected. "I provided the means, but you provided the moral courage to accept it. That matters, Cassian, more than you know." "The church will come," Cassian said. "Someone will talk. Someone will ask too many questions about where the food came from. And when they learn a vampire is living here? Let them come." Valerian moved to stand beside him at the rampart. "I've survived 500 years of persecution. I can survive a few more inquisitors." "It's not you I'm worried about." Cassian looked out at his village, at his people who were finally eating their fill. "They'll use the people against us, threaten them, promise them salvation if they denounce the monster and the Lord who sheltered him. Then we'll have to make sure your people have a reason to choose us over the church," Valerian said. "We'll have to be better than their fear, more compelling than their faith." "How do you propose we do that?" Valerian's smile was sharp. by building something worth protecting. By creating a province where humans and vampires live not just in tolerance, but in actual cooperation. By proving that the old stories are wrong, that we can be something other than predator and prey. That's impossible, Cassian said. The church has spent 1,000 years teaching that vampires are demons. You can't undo that kind of hatred with good intentions and grain distributions. Can't I? Valerian's eyes glittered with challenge. Watch me. Over the following weeks, Valerian proved himself to be more than just a wealthy immortal with access to magical resources. He was also a brilliant administrator, a skilled negotiator, and a surprisingly compassionate landlord. He spent hours each day meeting with families in the village, listening to their problems, offering solutions. To the farmer whose plow had broken, Valerian provided a new one, stronger and more efficient than any the man had owned before. To the widow whose roof had caved in during winter, he sent workers to repair it and reinforce the structure. To the children who had no school, he hired a tutor from the capital and funded a small schoolhouse. But more than his gifts, it was his presence that began to change things. Valerian walked through the village without guards, without weapons, without any of the protections that most nobles demanded. He spoke to people as equals, remembered their names, asked about their families. When old Thomas's wife fell ill, Valerian sat by her bedside for 3 nights straight, using what he called minor magics to ease her fever and pain. "He's not what I expected," Eliza said one evening as she served Cassian dinner. Valerian had declined to join him, explaining that he dined alone and preferred it that way. "A vampire, I mean. He's so human?" Cassian suggested. "Kind," Eliza said. "Is that strange? Can monsters be kind?" "I don't think he's a monster," Cassian said slowly. "Or if he is, he's trying very hard not to be." But the peace couldn't last. 6 weeks after Valerian's arrival, a messenger arrived from the capital bearing the seal of the church. Cassian broke the wax with trembling fingers and read, "Lord Cassian Graythorn, it has come to our attention that you are harboring a creature of darkness within your province. We hereby summon you to appear before the Archbishop's Council to answer charges of heresy, corruption, and endangering the souls of your people. You have 14 days to comply. Failure to appear will result in immediate excommunication and seizure of your lands. May God have mercy on your soul." Bishop Thornwald laughed harshly. "You would have us waste resources investigating what we already know? The vampire is evil by his very nature. It matters not what good deeds he performs. A demon wrapped in charity is still a demon." "Then you've already decided," Cassian said quietly. "This isn't a trial, it's a condemnation. You brought me here not to listen, but to punish." "We brought you here to save your soul," Archbishop Cornelius said. "Lord Graythorn, you are young. Desperate circumstances can cloud judgment. Renounce the vampire. Send him away from your lands. Return to the embrace of the church, and all will be forgiven." "No." The word fell like a stone into still water. "No?" Thornwald's face reddened. "You dare refuse the Archbishop's mercy?" "I dare refuse a mercy that requires me to betray someone who saved my people when you would not." Cassian straightened his shoulders. "I came here hoping to find wisdom. Instead, I find fear dressed up as righteousness. You speak of demons, but the only evil I see is in your willingness to condemn without evidence, to destroy without investigation. Valerian Nightshade has done more good in 2 months than this council has done for my province in 2 years. Enough." Thornwald's hand moved to the silver cross at his neck. "I call for immediate excommunication. This man has clearly been corrupted beyond—" "Wait!" Archbishop Cornelius raised his hand. The old man's eyes were thoughtful, studying Cassian with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Lord Greythorn, you said your vampire lord used ancient magic to summon the food. Starlight magic, yes?" Cassian nodded warily. "Describe exactly what you saw." The stars grew brighter. Light descended like threads, weaving into physical forms. The food materialized out of that light." Several bishops exchanged glances. The archbishop's expression was unreadable. "That is not demonic magic." "Your Grace?" Thornwald looked shocked. "I said that is not demonic magic," Cornelius repeated firmly. "Demonic power corrupts as it creates. It leaves a stain on the world, a wrongness that can be felt by those sensitive to such things. What Lord Greythorn describes is something else entirely. Something—" he paused, seeming to wrestle with his words. "Something we have not seen in many centuries." "Surely you're not suggesting—" another bishop began. "I'm not suggesting anything yet." The archbishop stood, moving to one of the windows. "There are texts, very old texts, kept in the deepest archives of this cathedral. Texts that speak of a time before the covenant of separation, when vampires were not enemies of humanity, but allies. Guardians, some accounts call them, protectors against threats we no longer remember." He turned back to face the council. "I always assumed those texts were allegorical, myths designed to teach moral lessons, nothing more. But if what Lord Greythorn describes is accurate—" "They're real," Cassian said quietly. "The stories are real. Valerian told me about the war against the things from beyond, about how vampires sacrificed their humanity to protect us." "Blasphemy!" Thornwald surged forward. "Your Grace, surely you don't believe this heretic's tales?" "I believe what I saw in his eyes when he described the magic," Cornelius said calmly. "He witnessed something profound, something that moved him deeply. That kind of awe cannot be faked, Bishop Thornwald, and it cannot be inspired by demonic corruption." "Then what do you propose?" another bishop asked. "We cannot simply ignore the law. The edicts are clear. Vampires are to be destroyed on sight." "The edicts were written 800 years ago by men who believed the sun revolved around the earth," the archbishop said. "Perhaps it's time we reconsidered our assumptions." He looked at Cassian. "I will send investigators to your province. They will be instructed to conduct a thorough examination, not just of the vampire's actions, but of the people's testimony. They will have 3 months. At the end of that time, we will reconvene this council to hear their findings." "Your Grace, this is madness!" Thornwald protested. "This is wisdom," Cornelius corrected. "We are not barbarians, Bishop. We do not condemn without evidence. Lord Greythorn has challenged us to prove our accusations. Very well, we shall accept that challenge." His gaze sharpened on Cassian. "But understand this, young lord. If even one person in your province has been harmed by this vampire, if even one drop of innocent blood has been spilled, I will personally lead the inquisitors who burn him to ash, and you will watch. Are we clear?" "Perfectly," Cassian said. "I welcome your investigation. I welcome the truth." As Cassian left the council chamber, he found Valerian waiting in the cathedral's shadow-filled cloister, the only place within the holy grounds where the vampire could stand without pain. "Well?" Valerian asked. 3 months, Cassian said. "They're sending investigators. If they find no evidence of harm, the archbishop will reconsider the church's position on vampires." Valerian was silent for a long moment. "That's more than I expected." The archbishop mentioned old texts, stories about vampires as guardians. He seemed to believe they might be more than myths. Archbishop Cornelius, Valerian said slowly. I should have realized. He would be old enough to have access to the restricted archives, old enough to have studied the forbidden histories. A strange expression crossed his face. Did he give you his full name? No, just Archbishop Cornelius. Cornelius Nightshade, Valerian said quietly. He's my great-great-great-grandson, or he was, before I became what I am. We shared blood 500 years ago. He would be descended from my mortal brother's line. Cassian stared. The Archbishop is your family? Distant family. He probably doesn't even know. The Nightshade name has passed through so many generations, become so diluted that the connection would seem meaningless. Valerian smiled sadly, but perhaps not entirely meaningless. Perhaps some part of him recognized the truth when you spoke it. Perhaps blood calls to blood, even across centuries. They returned to Greythorn Province to find it in an uproar. News of Cassian's journey to the capital had spread, and with it, the knowledge that their lord was protecting a vampire. The reaction was complicated. Some people were grateful, understanding that Valerian had saved them when no one else would. Others were frightened, uncertain whether to trust their own relief or believe the church's teachings about vampiric evil. A few were outright hostile, demanding that Valerian be cast out before he brought God's judgment down upon them all. Cassian called a town meeting in the village square, where nearly every resident gathered. He stood on the steps of the small church. Father Benedict had fled to the capital the moment he learned about Valerian, but the building itself remained, and addressed his people. I won't lie to you, he said. Lord Valerian is a vampire. He drinks blood to survive, he cannot walk in sunlight, and he has lived for over 500 years. These are facts. But here are some other facts. 2 months ago, your children were dying. Your families were starving. I begged everyone I could think of for help, and no one came. No one cared. Then Valerian arrived, and within days you had food. Within weeks you had hope. Because of him, you're alive. But at what cost? Someone shouted from the crowd. Our souls? Our salvation? Your souls are your own, Cassian replied. No vampire can take them. The church teaches that your immortal essence belongs to God, and nothing can change that except your own choices. Valerian hasn't asked you to renounce your faith. He hasn't demanded worship or servitude. He simply helped. Is that really so evil? The church says vampires are demons, old Thomas called out. His voice was troubled, but not hostile. Are we to believe they've been wrong for 800 years? I'm asking you to believe your own eyes, Cassian said, to trust your own experiences. Has Valerian harmed anyone here? Has he taken blood without permission? Has he used his power to control or manipulate you? The crowd murmured, but no one spoke up with accusations. The church says vampires are demons, old Thomas called out. His voice was troubled, but not hostile. Are we to believe they've been wrong for 800 years? I'm asking you to believe your own eyes, Cassian said, to trust your own experiences. Has Valerian harmed anyone here? Has he taken blood without permission? Has he used his power to control or manipulate you? The crowd murmured, but no one spoke up with accusations. The church is sending investigators, Cassian continued. They'll be here within the week. They'll question each of you, examine everything. This is your chance to tell the truth, whatever that truth is. If you've been hurt, if you've been frightened, if Valerian has done anything wrong, you must speak up. But if he hasn't, If he's been nothing but helpful, then say that too. Don't let fear make you lie. What if they don't believe us? A woman asked. What if they decide he's evil no matter what we say? Then we face that together, Cassian said. But I have faith in you, in the truth, and yes, in Valerian. I believe that goodness can exist in unexpected forms. I believe that courage matters more than doctrine. And I believe that this province, these people, are worth fighting for. The crowd dispersed slowly, people clustering in small groups to discuss what they'd heard. Cassian watched them go, feeling the weight of leadership heavier than ever before. That was well spoken, Valerian said, emerging from the shadow of a nearby building. Though perhaps overly optimistic. Do you think I'm wrong? About the investigators finding nothing? I think you're assuming they'll be honest. Valerian's expression was dark. You're assuming that evidence will matter more than prejudice. In my experience, humans have a remarkable capacity for seeing only what they wish to see. Then we'll have to give them something impossible to ignore, Cassian said. We'll have to be so obviously good, so undeniably helpful, that even the most zealous inquisitor can't twist it into evil. Over the next 3 months, that became their mission. Valerian threw himself into improving the province with almost desperate intensity. He funded the construction of a new mill, more efficient than the old one, and powered by an ingenious system of water wheels that he designed himself. He brought in master craftsmen to teach the villagers advanced techniques in metalworking, weaving, and carpentry. He established a lending library, filling it with books on agriculture, medicine, and history. But more than his material contributions, it was his presence that made the difference. Valerian spent hours each day simply talking with people, listening to their problems, offering advice, sometimes just sitting with the elderly who were lonely. He was patient with the children who followed him around, asking endless questions about what it was like to be immortal. He was respectful to the young priest, Father Thomas, who'd arrived to replace Benedict and approached the vampire with extreme caution. "I don't understand you," Father Thomas admitted one evening when Cassian found them sitting together in the church discussing theology. "Everything I was taught says you should be evil, but you're not. How can that be?" "Because your teachers were wrong," Valerian said. Or perhaps not entirely wrong. There are evil vampires, just as there are evil humans. But evil is a choice, Father, not a nature. I chose to be this way. I chose to care. Just as you chose to take holy orders rather than becoming a merchant like your father wanted. How did you know about my father? I didn't, but I've lived long enough to recognize a certain look, the expression of someone who disappointed their family by following their conscience instead of their expectations. Valerian's smile was gentle. It's the same look I see in the mirror. On the rare occasions I can see my own reflection in water or polished metal. The investigators arrived in the 8th week. 3 stern-faced inquisitors led by Bishop Thornwald himself. Cassian's heart sank when he saw them. Thornwald had made his opinion clear at the council. He was here to find evil, and he would search until he found it. But Thornwald had reckoned without the people of Greythorn. The inquisitors spent weeks questioning every resident of the province, examining every corner of Cassian's castle, investigating every rumor and whisper. They searched for victims, for evidence of mind control, for any sign of vampiric corruption. They tested the food that Valerian had provided, checked the water supply for contamination, examined the buildings he'd funded for hidden symbols or dark magic. They found nothing. Moreover, they found testimony after testimony praising Valerian. Old Thomas spoke of how the vampire had sat with his dying wife, easing her pain with gentle magic when there was no hope of healing. Young Eliza described how Valerian had encouraged her love of learning, lending her books and discussing philosophy with her, as if she were a scholar rather than a servant girl. The farmers talked about his agricultural advice, which had already improved their yields. The craftsmen praised his teaching methods and his patience. Even Father Thomas, when questioned, admitted reluctantly that he'd found Valerian to be thoughtful, knowledgeable about Scripture, and surprisingly devout in his own way. "This is impossible," Thornwald said on the last day of investigation, pacing Cassian's study with barely contained fury. "There must be something, some secret, some hidden evil." "Perhaps the evil you're looking for doesn't exist," Cassian suggested. "Vampires are evil by nature." "Are they?" Valerian's voice came from the doorway. The vampire entered, moving with his usual fluid grace. "What if I told you, Bishop, that everything you believe about my kind is a lie? What if I told you that vampires were once humanity's greatest defenders, and that we were branded as monsters only after we'd already saved you? I would say you're a liar and a deceiver." "Then let me prove otherwise." Valerian reached into his coat and withdrew a small leather-bound book, ancient and worn. "This is my journal from the Year of Darkness, what you now call the year 532 by your calendar. Read it. Read about the things that came through the void. Read about how we fought them, how we died and died again until we learned how to kill them permanently. Read about the price we paid to save humanity." Thornwald took the book as if it might burn him. "This proves nothing. You could have written this yesterday." "The leather is over 500 years old," Valerian said. "The ink is from a formula that hasn't been used in 3 centuries. The language is Old Sanction, a dialect that died out before the current kingdom was founded. Have your scholars examine it. They'll confirm its authenticity." "Why give this to me? Why now?" "Because I'm tired," Valerian said quietly. "Tired of hiding. Tired of being hated for crimes I didn't commit while my actual crimes are forgotten. I want the truth to matter, Bishop Thornwald. I want people to know what we were before they decide what we are." Thornwald left the next day with his fellow inquisitors, taking the journal with him. Cassian watched them go with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Do you think it will make a difference?" he asked Valerian. "I don't know, but at least now the truth is out there. What they choose to do with it is beyond my control." The weeks that followed were tense. Cassian tried to maintain normalcy, but everyone in the province was aware that their fate hung in the balance. If the council ruled against them, if Thornwald convinced the archbishop that Valerian was evil despite all evidence to the contrary, then everything they'd built would be destroyed. Then, on a cold morning in early spring, a messenger arrived, bearing the archbishop's seal. Cassian broke it with shaking hands and read, "Lord Cassian Graythorn, the council has completed its review of the investigators' findings and the evidence presented. After much prayer and deliberation, we have reached our decision. The charges of heresy are dismissed. Furthermore, the council has voted to officially revoke the Edict of Eternal Darkness, which commanded the destruction of all vampires on site. In its place, we institute the Covenant of Evaluation, which recognizes that vampires, like humans, may choose good or evil, and that each must be judged by their actions rather than their nature. Lord Valerian Nightshade is hereby granted sanctuary within the borders of Graythorn Province and is recognized as a legitimate resident under the protection of both civil and ecclesiastical law. Any who would harm him must first present evidence of actual wrongdoing to a church tribunal. This is an unprecedented decision, and it will be controversial. There will be resistance, but truth must prevail over tradition, and the evidence of Lord Valerian's character is undeniable. You have taught us a valuable lesson, Lord Greythorn. We pray we have the wisdom to learn from it. Archbishop Cornelius Nightshade, on behalf of the Council. Cassian read the letter 3 times before he trusted himself to speak. When he finally found his voice, he called for Valerian. The vampire appeared within moments, his expression carefully neutral. Is it bad news? Read it yourself. Valerian took the letter, his eyes moving over the words with increasing disbelief. When he finished, he simply stood there, the paper trembling in his hands. They believed us, he whispered. They believed the truth, Cassian corrected. You were right. Evidence matters. Character matters. You spent 3 months being undeniably good, and they had no choice but to acknowledge it. Do you know what this means? Valerian looked up, and Cassian was startled to see tears in the vampire's eyes. He hadn't known they could cry. For 500 years, I've been hunted, hated, forced to hide what I am or embrace being a monster because those were the only options. But this changes everything. If the Church can acknowledge that vampires can choose goodness, then maybe others can too. Maybe my kind doesn't have to be monsters anymore. Then you've started something bigger than you realize, Cassian said. This isn't just about you. It's about every vampire who's ever wanted to be more than what the stories say they should be. Over the following months, word spread. The Church's decision was indeed controversial. Many priests refused to accept it. Many nobles continued to hunt vampires regardless of the new laws. But others, inspired by Valerian's example, began to question the old assumptions. Reports came in of vampires emerging from hiding, seeking sanctuary, trying to live openly among humans for the first time in centuries. Not all of those attempts ended well. Some vampires had spent too long being monsters and couldn't adjust to being anything else. Some humans were too frightened or too filled with hate to accept the change. But enough succeeded that the world began to shift slowly towards something new. Valerian became a symbol, the vampire who'd chose compassion over convenience, who'd risked everything to save people who'd been taught to fear him. Pilgrims traveled to Greythorn just to meet him, to hear his story, to ask for his blessing. He received letters from other vampires begging for advice on how to live peacefully among humans. I never wanted to be famous, Valerian told Cassian one evening as they stood on the castle ramparts watching the sunset paint the sky gold and crimson. I just wanted to do something good, to balance the scales, even a little, for all the evil I'd done before. You've done more than that, Cassian said. You've changed the world. We changed the world, Valerian corrected. You took my hand when anyone else would have turned away. You stood beside me when it would have been easier to betray me. You chose truth over safety, compassion over doctrine. That kind of courage is rarer than you think, Cassian Greythorn. I just did what seemed right. Exactly, Valerian smiled. That's what heroism is. Doing what's right even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. They stood in comfortable silence, watching as the sun sank below the horizon. Soon, Valerian would have to retreat indoors. He could tolerate indirect sunlight, but direct rays would still burn him. But for these few moments, they could stand together in the fading light. Two improbable friends who defied the world's expectations. "What will you do now?" Cassian asked. "The Council has given you sanctuary, but Greythorn is a small province. You could go anywhere, do anything. I could, Valerian agreed. But I think I'll stay here if you'll have me. There's still work to be done. Orphans who need housing, roads that need building, a school that could be expanded. Besides, he glanced at Cassian with something that might have been affection. I've grown fond of this place, of these people, of you. Then stay, Cassian said, for as long as you like. Greythorn will always be your home. 5 years later, Greythorn Province was unrecognizable from the dying collection of hovels it had once been. The village had grown into a small town, prosperous and thriving. The school that Valerian had founded now educated children from 3 neighboring provinces. The roads he'd funded had opened up trade routes that brought wealth to every family. The hospital he'd built, staffed with both human doctors and vampires who'd learned healing magic, treated patients from across the kingdom. But more importantly, Greythorn had become a symbol of what was possible when fear gave way to trust. Humans and vampires lived side by side, working together, learning from each other. It wasn't always easy. There were still tensions, still moments of fear and misunderstanding, but they persevered, choosing cooperation over conflict, hope over hate. Cassian, now recognized as one of the kingdom's wisest lords, often gave speeches about his experiences. He spoke at universities, at churches, at royal courts, always with the same message. Judge beings by their actions, not their nature. Choose compassion over comfortable prejudice. Be brave enough to trust even when trust is hard. And Valerian, no longer hiding in shadows, walked openly through the streets of Greythorn Town, greeting people by name, stopping to help where he could. Children no longer fled from him in terror. Instead, they ran up to ask him questions, to show him their schoolwork, to request stories about the old days. He'd become not just accepted, but beloved, a permanent fixture of the community he'd saved. On the 5th anniversary of the day Valerian had burned his gold, the people of Greythorn threw a festival. They filled the town square with music and food, with dancing and laughter. At the center of it all, they erected a monument. A statue showing a human and a vampire standing side by side, hands clasped in friendship. Cassian and Valerian stood together before the monument as it was unveiled, neither quite able to speak past the emotion clogging their throats. "Thank you," Valerian finally managed, "for taking my hand, for trusting me when you had no reason to." "Thank you," Cassian replied, "for caring enough to offer it." They watched as children play around the statue's base, human and vampire offspring running together without fear, without hatred, simply enjoying being young and alive and free. In that moment, Cassian understood what they'd accomplished. They hadn't just saved one province. They'd planted a seed that might eventually grow to change the world. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night?" Valerian asked. "When I asked what you would sacrifice to preserve your morality?" "I remember." "You sacrificed your certainty," Valerian said softly. "Your comfortable belief that the world was simple, that good and evil were easy to identify. You chose complexity over clarity, truth over tradition. That's harder than you know." "It was worth it," Cassian said, watching the children play. "Look at them, Valerian. Look at what we built. A future where children don't have to choose between starving with their souls clean or surviving with them tainted. A future where differences don't automatically mean enmity. That's worth any sacrifice." As the sun set on the festival, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, the two friends stood together in companionable silence. Around them, their town, their people, celebrated not just survival, but triumph. They'd faced darkness and fear and hatred, and they'd chosen something better. They'd chosen each other. And in the heavens above, the stars began to appear. Those same stars that had woven themselves into grain and hope 5 years ago. They blazed bright in the darkening sky, silent witnesses to a miracle that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with courage. The courage to trust, the courage to change, the courage to believe that even monsters could choose to be heroes, and that perhaps, in the end, the only real monsters were those who refused to see that possibility. Final report. Body word count, 10,492. Henrik Thornwald, High Inquisitor. It's over, Cassian said, passing the letter to Valerian. They know. They're coming. Valerian read the letter carefully, his expression unreadable. 14 days. That's actually quite generous of them. Usually they just show up with torches and holy water. This isn't funny. I'm not laughing. Valerian set the letter down. You need to decide, Cassian. Right now, tonight. You can still save yourself. Send me away. Tell the council I left before you could stop me. They might believe you. They might let you keep your lands and your title. And abandon you? After everything you've done for my people? I'm a vampire, Valerian said flatly. I've lived 500 years. I'll survive whatever they throw at me. But you're human, mortal. If you stand with me at that council, if you defend me before the archbishop, you're gambling with your life, your title, everything. So you're saying I should betray you? I'm saying you should be smart, pragmatic. There's no shame in self-preservation. Cassian stood, pacing across his study. Through the window, he could see Greythorn Village, lit and lively now, so different from the dying collection of hovels it had been 2 months ago. His people were alive because of Valerian. They were thriving because of Valerian. Children were learning to read. Farmers were bringing in winter crops. Families were rebuilding. All of it, because one vampire had decided to care. No, he said finally, I won't betray you. I'll go to the council. I'll defend you. And if they excommunicate me, if they strip me of my title, then so be it. I'd rather be a damned peasant who did the right thing than a blessed lord who let his people die to preserve his own purity. Valerian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. You understand what this means? The church is powerful, Cassian. If they declare you heretic, no one will help you. No one will trade with you. You'll be marked as cursed, tainted by association with the undead. Then I'll be cursed, Cassian said. I don't care anymore. I'm tired of caring what people think when there are children who need feeding, and widows who need housing, and families who need hope. If the church can't see that what you've done here is good, then the church is blind. The church isn't blind, Valerian said softly. It's afraid. And fear makes people do terrible things. Then we'll have to be braver than their fear. Valerian smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. You are a remarkable man, Cassian Greythorn. I chose well. They spent the next 2 weeks preparing. Valerian taught Cassian the history of his kind, the true history, not the stories told by the church. He explained how vampires had once been humanity's protectors, beings who'd voluntarily surrendered their mortality to gain the power needed to fight against the things that should not be. Creatures from beyond the stars that had once threatened all life on Earth. We won that war, Valerian explained as they sat in the library late one night, surrounded by ancient texts. Pushed the things back into the void and sealed the pathways they'd used to enter our world. But the victory cost us dearly. To gain the power we needed, We had to become something other than human. We lost the ability to tolerate sunlight, to eat normal food, to reproduce. We became dependent on blood to survive. Why didn't you tell people? Cassian asked. Why let them believe you were demons? We tried, Valerian said bitterly. For the first century after the war, we tried. But humans have short memories and long grudges. They saw creatures that drank blood and couldn't walk in daylight, and they made up stories to explain us. When we tried to correct those stories, they called us liars. When we tried to help, they accused us of trying to enslave them. Eventually, most of us gave up. We withdrew from human society, either hiding what we were or embracing the monster role they'd assigned us. But you didn't give up. I tried, Valerian admitted. For 300 years, I played the villain. I took what I wanted, killed when it was convenient, treated humans as nothing more than food sources. I was exactly what the stories said I should be. His hand clenched on the armrest of his chair. Then, one night, I killed a young woman. She was nobody important, a servant girl, maybe 17 years old. She'd witnessed something she shouldn't have, so I snapped her neck without a second thought. But as she died, she looked at me with such confusion, such betrayal, and she whispered, "Why? I helped you. I brought you blankets when you were cold. Why would you hurt me?" "She'd been kind to you," Cassian said softly. "She'd been kind to me," Valerian echoed, "and I'd murdered her for it." That moment broke something in me. Or maybe it fixed something. I don't know. But I left that castle and spent the next 200 years trying to be different, better, trying to earn redemption for all the evil I'd done. He looked at Cassian. "That's why I came here, why I chose you, because I saw a good man trying desperately to save his people, and I thought, here's a chance. Maybe, just this once, I can be the hero instead of the monster." "You are the hero," Cassian said. "Whatever you were before, whatever you did, you've saved hundreds of lives here. That matters, does it?" Valerian's eyes were ancient and sad. "Will it matter to the church? Will it matter to the council when they pass judgment?" "We'll make it matter," Cassian promised. "We'll make them see." The day of the council arrived too quickly. Cassian and Valerian rode to the capital together, along with Marcus and Hannah, who'd insisted on accompanying them as witnesses. The journey took 3 days, and with each passing mile, Cassian felt his confidence waning. The capital city of Sanctum was built around the Grand Cathedral, a massive structure of white stone and stained glass that dominated the skyline. Cassian had visited twice before, once as a child with his father, once as a young man for his investiture as lord. Both times he'd been awed by the cathedral's majesty, the sense of divine presence that seemed to emanate from its very stones. Now, looking up at those towering spires, he felt only dread. "We can still turn back," Valerian said quietly as they approached the cathedral gates. "You can still save yourself." "I thought we were past this conversation," Cassian replied. "We are. I just needed to offer one more time. To be sure." "I'm sure." The Archbishop's Council met in the cathedral's highest chamber, a circular room with windows on all sides that allowed sunlight to pour in from every angle. It was, Cassian realized, deliberately designed to be hostile to vampires. The entire space was one giant ward against creatures of darkness. Valerian would not be able to enter. "That's all right," the vampire said when Cassian pointed this out. "You don't need me there. You just need to tell the truth. They won't listen to me without you." "Then make them listen." Valerian gripped his shoulder. "You're a good man, Cassian Graythorn. You've always been a good man. Trust in that. Trust in the rightness of what we've done." The council was already assembled when Cassian entered the chamber. 12 bishops sat in a semicircle, their faces stern and judgmental. At the center, elevated above the others, sat Archbishop Cornelius, an ancient man with a white beard and eyes like chips of ice. Lord Cassian Graythorne, the Archbishop's voice echoed through the chamber. You have been summoned to answer charges of heresy. How do you plead? Not guilty, Cassian said clearly. You deny harboring a vampire in your province? I don't deny it. I simply deny that doing so was heresy. Murmurs ran through the assembled bishops. The Archbishop raised his hand for silence. Explain yourself. So Cassian did. He told them everything about the failed harvests, the plague, the starvation. He told them about his desperate appeals for help, the way every lord and every church official had turned him away. He told them about Valerian's arrival, about the food that had appeared, about the way his province had been transformed from dying to thriving in mere weeks. He saved my people, Cassian said. While the church was debating theology, while my fellow lords were protecting their own interests, this vampire, this creature you call a demon, chose to act. He gave everything, asked for nothing in return, except a place to stay. And because of him, hundreds of people who would have died are now alive. Children are being educated, families are being fed, houses are being built. All of it, because one vampire decided to care. Pretty words, Bishop Thornwald said coldly. He was a younger man, perhaps 40, with the zealous eyes of a true believer. But actions matter more than words, and the actions of your vampire lord speak clearly. He has used magic, demonic magic, to corrupt your province. He has made your people dependent on his power, his wealth. He is a serpent in paradise, Lord Graythorne, and you are too blind to see it. I see perfectly well, Cassian shot back. I see a being who could have taken everything, and instead gave freely. I see someone who could have demanded servitude, and instead offered partnership. If that's corruption, if that's evil, then your definitions need revision. Mind your tongue, Thornwald stood. You speak to the council of God's chosen representatives. I speak to men, Cassian said. Men who have never missed a meal in their lives, judging a decision made by a man who watched his people starve. Do you know what it's like, Bishop Thornwald? Have you ever held a dying child and known you had no way to save her? Have you ever walked through your village and counted the dead? No. He looked around the chamber, meeting each bishop's eyes in turn. None of you have. You live in comfort and plenty while lecturing the rest of us about morality and purity. Well, I chose life over purity. I chose my people over your approval. And I'd make that choice again every single time. The silence was deafening. Archbishop Cornelius finally spoke, his voice soft but carrying clearly through the chamber. Tell me, Lord Graythorne, does this vampire drink blood? Cassian hesitated. I don't know. I've never seen him feed. But you assume he must, yes? For that is the nature of his kind. If he does, he's never harmed anyone in my province. I would know. My people would tell me. Perhaps, the Archbishop said. Or perhaps they've been so charmed by his gifts that they would hide his crimes to protect their benefactor. That is the insidious nature of vampiric corruption. It makes evil look like good, monsters look like saviors. Then send investigators, Cassian challenged. Send your inquisitors to my province. Let them question every person, examine every inch of land. If they find any evidence that Valerian has harmed anyone, I will surrender him to you willingly. But if they find nothing, when they find nothing, then you must acknowledge that your prejudices have blinded you to the possibility that not all vampires are evil. Bishop